What is up guys, Andy Forestine Runner here, and today I'm giving you guys my first impressions of the Hoka One One Carbon X 2. So that's 14.3 really solid marathon pace session type of miles done and dusted in the Hoka One One Carbon X2 for my very first impressions on this awesome new shoe, but not without its flaws. Today we're going to go over with you guys my first impressions of the shoe, give a little comparison to the Rocket X because a fair few of you have asked that straight off the bat. But as always with our first impressions, we'll go through the technical overview before giving you my first impressions. And fear not, if you're new to the channel, we test our shoes much more thoroughly than just first impressions. There'll be a long run test later this weekend, and then of course a 100-mile update once we reach that point in the shoe. So if you're excited for today's video guys, make sure you give it a like, share it with friends, subscribe to the channel for weekly running content, and we'll start with the technical. So we'll start off by saying this shoe has a 32mm stack height in the heel and a 27mm stack height in the forefoot, meaning we have a 5mm heel to toe drop. I went true to size in the shoe, but just bear in mind when you get up to my sizes, which is a UK 13, Hoka and other brands, some of them like New Balance and Adidas, tend to get to 11 and then they go 12.5, 13.5, 14.5. So I'm a 13.5 in this shoe, and in my size it comes in at a hefty 320 grams or 11.3 ounces. And what we'll do as always is we'll work our way from the heel counter area, cover this section, the tongue, the lacing, the upper. We'll talk briefly about the midsole and then cover the outsole. So let's start with the heel counter area. Quite a plush heel counter area for a racing shoe. Quite a bit of padding around here. From memory, it certainly feels like a little bit more padding here than was originally in the first version of the Carbon X. We have this ankle flare, this heel flare here, which kind of is quite a big heel flare, to be honest with you. Maybe a little bit excessive, but it's very nice and cushioned. To be honest with you, a really comfy fit in there. And what also makes this shoe a very comfy fit in and around the ankle area is the tongue as well. Now, in my opinion, the tongue is slightly oversized. It does go all the way around, literally wraps all the way around your foot, but it's a relatively thin tongue, but then cushion starts to appear about a centimetre down the tongue to cover your midfoot across the laces, and just that whole encompassing slotting your foot in with the cushioning, with the tongue wrapping around, albeit the tongue being slightly excessive, it does feel very comfortable. The tongue is gusseted as well, so it does stay in place, which is really nice. And I have to say, in my first impressions, we'll talk about shortly, I didn't experience any issues with any slipping, sliding in that area. So another great comfortable job there. Hoka, simple lacing system. Laces for me were a little bit stretchy. I tightened them from the bottom to the top, got out the door, walked down, start my run, then had to retighten them. Once I was on the run, they were fine and I didn't notice them, but I did notice the material is just a tight, it's not like stretchy, but there's a bit of give in there. So just bear in mind, you might want to tighten them, but don't do them too much, because when you might get into your first run, you might need to redo them. But for me, again, a lovely simple lacing system, nothing fancy, and was able to get a really solid lockdown and very comfortable as well, as I said. We have an engineered mesh upper, which obviously goes all the way around the shoe. Very light, very breathable, felt very comfortable on foot. The one thing I'm going to say about this upper and the shape of the shoe in particular, actually this has nothing to do with the upper, but more the shape of the shoe, is this is a lot thinner than, or not a lot, but it is thinner, noticeably thinner than the original Carbon X2, or I found it probably about as the same width as the Rincon. Now the Rincon for me, or the Rincon 2 I should say, is just marginally on the narrow side, and this I have to say is noticeable. For me, I didn't have any issues in the Carbon X1. I didn't have any issues with it in this version, but I certainly did notice it was a lot snugger around this midfoot area. But overall, we're talking about the upper, lovely and breathable, very, very nice. Goes around here into a bit more rigidity in the heel here. As you can see, there's absolutely no give there, so there's a bit more reinforcements in and around here. We have the ProFly midsole being used, which is a massive improvement from the original version. It felt really good. Just it feels like the Rocket X does. I'm assuming it's exactly the same compound of ProFly, but it just feels really, really good. And then we've got a rubber outsole, which literally covers the whole shoe. And you can see here, it literally is about 5 to 6 mil thick from what I can see here. Now that's thinner than what was in the original version, which was great because there was just a bit too much outsole rubber in the other one, and again, in my opinion, probably still a little bit too much here, but this covers all the way down the shoe, and as you can see, a bit of exposure here just so you can see the carbon plate. So that's the shoe from a technical perspective, but how did I find it on its first impressions? Well, to be perfectly honest with you, I did give it a little bit of a baptism of fire. 14.3 miles, 6x3k at marathon pace, and then floating around moderate pace is quite a hefty workout, especially for that time of the morning, which was a Thursday morning. So again, apologies for the lack of B-roll. It was super dark, couldn't get the normal shots that I'd like to. We just had to work with what we could, but I have to be honest with you, it was a real pleasure to run in, kind of a relief once again. That feeling that the shoe is absolutely solid. I have to say though, it's not without its flaws. The weight of this shoe is pretty hefty. Bearing in mind it's a racing shoe, 11.3 ounces in my size, 320 grams is big. That's big for a racing shoe. That's the weightiest racing shoe I have. Weightiest, is that a word? The heaviest racing shoe I have. So I've got to be honest with you, I don't know, and I think from memory, because I don't have the original Carbon X anymore, from memory, I think it's heavier than my version 1. I have refrained from watching any other V2 videos for a while, so I can't remember from people comparing V1 to V2 if it is heavier, but I have to say, I think it is heavier, especially in my size anyway. And the narrowness of the shoe, I haven't yet experienced the issue, although I do notice it's there, and it's going to be interesting to see as the miles tick off if that becomes an issue, because towards the end of the Rincon 2 that I've run in, and actually I got the Rincon 2 out only the other week to do another long run in, and I did experience that narrowness and a slight bit of rubbing in this side right here on the medial, yes, I'm getting my terminology right, the medial side just inside my toe. It was just the material was so tight, and I noticed it in this. It feels very, very similar width-wise to the Rincon 2. So whether that becomes an issue, I don't know, or whether this engineered mesh upper is going to have a bit more give in it, so it means that I'm not going to get that rubbing or too much tightness sensation, fingers crossed. Other than those two elements, I have to say it was another thoroughly enjoyable ride. The ProFly midsole is really, really good. It does feel very similar to what's in the Rocket X. I think the main difference that I noticed in particular with this is the rubber outsole. You do I'll be honest with you, I did notice a difference between this and the Rocket X with the rubber outsole. The rubber for me, I can't explain it very well. It almost nullifies a little bit of the soft and sponginess of the ProFly, whereas because of the lack of rubber outsole in the Rocket X, it makes the Rocket X feel a little bit softer, a little bit more springier. So as far as initial comparisons go, I have to be honest with you, the Rocket X gave me that wow factor. This thing has kind of given me a all is good thumbs up factor, but not quite wow factor. So I'm kind of leaning already towards saying the Rocket X is a better purchase than the Carbon X2. That's not to say this is bad, this is very good, but straight away, I think the overall design of the Rocket X is going in the right direction, and I kind of feel like this is still going in the right direction, but there's still unnecessary elements on this shoe. There just does not need to be this much outsole rubber. And I think the upper material, if they really want to make this a racer, they can shed a lot of weight in and around this area here. It's lovely and cushioned, but I expect that sort of cushioning from a daily trainer, maybe a speed trainer, maybe not necessarily a racing shoe. So overall, I have to be honest with you, it was a brilliant ride, had no issues, really enjoyed it. We'll be using it far more on marathon pace sessions, and of course excited to use it this weekend on the long run. But I think there's still work to be done with the Carbon X series. I'd like to see the Carbon X3 next year really strip back and really go again with something lighter weight, a little bit punchier and a little bit less outsole rubber. But those are my thoughts. Let me know in the comments below if you have got the Hoka One Carbon X2, what your thoughts are, if you enjoy them or if you are not getting on with them very well. I'm excited to test it more, and I'd love to hear the testing that you've done in the shoe so far. If you enjoyed today's video, guys, make sure you give it a like, share it with friends, subscribe to the channel for weekly running content, and I will see you on the next one. Until then.